Kremlin's arms manufacturers are under fire. At the beginning of the week, the plant in Dzerzhinsk, Nizhny Novgorod region of the Russian Federation was attacked again. This is one of the largest explosives manufacturers in Russia. Its products are used to load shells, guided aerial bombs, and warheads for missile systems. But overall, how many military factories are there in the Federation, and how are Ukrainian drones affecting the work of the enemy's military-industrial complex? Let's take a look.
Morning, October 6th. Within a minute, several explosions are heard. Local social media channels report that the plant in Dzerzhinsk has been attacked. They manufacture explosives for the Russian army there. The distance to the target from Ukraine's state border is about 1,000 kilometers. It had been hit before as well. In April 2024, strike drones damaged a pipeline and 2 workshops. And last autumn, according to our general staff, the Russians were storing guided aerial bombs at the facility. That's why several dozen Ukrainian drones visited the plant again.
And this is precisely the key enterprise engaged in the production of various types and kinds of explosives and explosive materials. In other words, everything that's in any kind of shell is produced at this plant.
According to our experts, in just 1 year, enemy military facilities were struck 86 times.
Today, Ukraine has a list of these critically important facilities, and the tactic of double or even triple strikes is being used so that the enemy cannot restore the operation of these enterprises.
It's not possible to destroy everything at once, so when planning operations, our military carefully selects their targets.
In this case, when setting targets, Ukraine determines how best to break the supply chain so as to cause the maximum possible damage at once. To several, that is, to several dozen enterprises involved in the production of various types of weapons.
For example, if there are disruptions in the supply of explosives, this will affect manufacturers of shells and missiles. And if it is possible to strike military electronics workshops, this will impact the pace of high-precision weapons production.
As an example, the Orenburg helium plant was hit. This is the only plant that produces, for example, helium for the aviation and military space industries of the Russian Federation.
So, how many military factories are there in the Federation overall? Investigators from the Russian Opposition Center dossier write that the enemy's military-industrial complex system includes more than 6,000 organizations, including branches. This data is as of the beginning of the year. A quarter of these enterprises are concentrated in Moscow. The capital region, St. Petersburg, Tatarstan, and Nizhny Novgorod are also among the leaders in terms of the number of enterprises.
These holdings include not only production facilities. Of course, this also significantly includes various design bureaus and specialized research institutes, all of which collectively develop and innovate new and advanced types of weaponry and military equipment that may later prominently appear, as they often say, on the modern battlefield.
In total, the Russian military-industrial complex register includes enterprises from 81 regions of the Federation, annexed Crimea, and the occupied regions of Ukraine.
Well, for example, the aviation industry. We practically can't get it anywhere. We can't get it from enterprises that produce missiles. Well, for example, that's Omsk, that's Votkinsk. And it's very difficult to reach enterprises that produce cruise missiles in the Moscow region because it is extremely well protected.
According to our experts, up to 5 million Russians are currently working in the enemy's military-industrial complex system. That's more than the entire population of some European countries.
We can compare this situation quite broadly to the historical European powers, which were, in many significant respects, much, much smaller in terms of their geographical reach and overall influence. So it is precisely this scale and centralization that allows Russia to achieve the results that today frighten the whole world. But the downside of such a system is precisely that these are not market relations.
In other words, the Russian defense industry drains state reserves and brings no profit at all.
Of course, Putin's inner circle is getting richer. But overall, the country's economic situation is rapidly deteriorating because any weapon, it doesn't produce anything, it doesn't generate profit. A shell, a tank, these are all things that will be destroyed.
The Ukrainian command notes that strikes on the Russian rear have significantly reduced the enemy's military potential, and the consequences are already visible on the battlefield. Rostislav Sisoyev, We Are Ukraine, United News Marathon.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian drones continue to destroy Russia's economic infrastructure. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, last night Ukrainian defense forces struck the Korobkovsky gas processing plant, one of the largest in southern Russia, as well as the linear production dispatcher station in Yefimovka, Volgograd region. It services several main pipelines for transporting oil and petroleum products to regions of the aggressor country. The Russian authorities reported fires and explosions at fuel and energy complex facilities. Major fires were also recorded on the map provided by the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Unknown drones also attacked a motor depot in the village of Matveyev-Kurgan, Rostov region. Numerous video confirmations were posted online by local residents. In the footage, a drone is seen flying at first. Then an explosion is heard and thick smoke rises into the air. Opposition Russian media reported that at least 2 drones were involved in the attack. Here is how local residents commented on the events.
That's where it went. Well, what can you do? Nothing is left. Aren't you shooting? Oh, I went over to the oil depot. The oil depot. The tanks exploded. Yeah, that's right. The oil depot. The main storage facility.
In June, the aggressor country violated the unofficial moratorium on mutual strikes against energy facilities. It is believed that the work of Ukrainian drones caused a fuel crisis in the Russian Federation. Popular fuel types are unavailable at gas stations. There is no gasoline available, not even 92 or 95 octane. The problem is especially acute for private gas stations since they are also struggling to purchase fuel due to high interest rates and reduced refining. By the way, on some days the volume of refining has dropped by almost a fifth. Exports have also decreased, including from key ports. In this way, the country is trying to harm the Kremlin's war machine and force the aggressor to peace negotiations. As a result, even drone production and the output of petroleum products in the Russian Federation have fallen to a 5-year low. This is reported by Bloomberg. And although Russia continues to attack Ukraine's critical infrastructure, Moscow should remember that this is a game 2 can play, or better yet, not play at all, and instead agree to an aerial ceasefire. However, is it possible to force the Kremlin into such an agreement? And more importantly, does Ukraine even need this? Mikhailo Minaliuk looked into this issue.
Footage from Yekaterinburg. Ukrainian long-range weapons struck the Ural turbine plant, which manufactures equipment for power stations. This week, Ukrainian drones reached Siberia and attacked the Tyumen oil refinery located 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine. As a result of the strike, a column for separating liquid mixtures and part of the water supply system were damaged. For several days in a row, the armed forces of Ukraine struck targets in Belgorod. There were power outages in the city. Meanwhile, Russian media began to stir up panic, claiming that American Tomahawks might have arrived in Ukraine. However, we have our own weapons capable of inflicting significant damage to the critical infrastructure of the Russian Federation. A mirror response. Recently, the enemy has intensified attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Strikes on electrical substations have left people without power for days. The Ministry of Energy is preparing for the worst-case scenario.
We are preparing, as I have already said, for various scenarios, including the worst-case one. But we really hope that through joint efforts we will still be able to maintain the stable operation of the energy systems and avoid prolonged outages.
A ceasefire in the sky will open the way to real diplomacy. President Zelensky stated this immediately after the Russian missile and drone attack on the night of October 5th. At that time, the enemy once again struck Ukrainian critical infrastructure facilities. But even after this, Kyiv is ready to stop the fire in the air. But is the Kremlin ready for this?
If negotiations begin and there is an agreement to cease fire in the air, a very popular opinion is that this is, yes, beneficial for Russia and not beneficial for us. From this point of view, they say that then we won't have any tools to put pressure on Russia. And pressure for what? In order to stop the war. And here, it's important to keep in mind, if a ceasefire in the air begins, that's the first step. the first stage, which should be followed by the next stages, ending the war on land, ending hostilities as such.
Experts note that Ukraine's critical infrastructure is suffering significantly as the enemy strikes at generation and distribution systems. Every day, facilities are hit by drone attacks. In Poltava region, a gas production enterprise has been destroyed. In Kharkiv, 2 key substations have been lost. However, Ukrainian missile and drone strikes on Russian motor depots and defense and industrial plants also have significant consequences. Russia is already experiencing a fuel shortage and recording rising prices. There is a ban and restrictions on the export of gasoline and diesel there. According to Zelensky, Russia has lost about 20% of its fuel, in particular due to strikes on oil refineries. If Putin does not stop the air attacks, Ukraine will strike harder.
They have more opportunities to strike at us, and our territory is smaller, while Russian territory is much larger, so we carry out targeted strikes. Nevertheless, the importance of these strikes is very significant, as they create targeted but very tangible problems, especially in Russia's fuel market. This is also a way to force Russia to end the war.
To win the war, it is necessary to inflict the maximum possible damage inside Russia. Russians must feel the impact of Ukrainian strikes firsthand, not just watch the war unfold on their television screens. President Zelensky has already threatened blackouts in the Belgorod and Kursk regions, saying that due to attacks, there will be large-scale power outages in Ukraine as well as for the enemy. So any talk of a truce would only benefit both sides equally.
Only this way. Moreover, in order not to repeat the mistakes made by the Americans in March when they agreed to stop strikes on the energy sector, this mistake must not be repeated. Therefore, there can be no talk whatsoever of any kind of unilateral truce.
Recently, Ukraine used a pair of Ukrainian Neptune and Flamingo missiles for the first time. Their results are already being felt, Zelensky stated. The German newspaper Welt reports, 3 Flamingo cruise missiles were used during the attack on the FSB base in occupied Crimea. Even before the strikes, we were left with craters up to 15 meters wide. Military experts assure that Ukraine should not be asking Russia for a truce. Rather, it is the Kremlin that should be asking us.
It all depends on the approach. If our missile program, at least for cruise missiles, starts working effectively. And if we get Tomahawks, then why would we need such a truce? We will get a chance to end the war entirely on our own terms.
We shouldn't be persuading the Russian Federation. We need to demonstrate the weapons we can produce, show what they are capable of, and dictate the terms to the Russian Federation. If we have the weapons, if we can launch thousands of missiles, that's the best security guarantee.
The continuation of strikes means a long war of endurance for infrastructure. And Ukraine has every chance to win it. Next year, the state plans to spend $35 billion on the production of drones and missiles, which means we will have enough long-range weapons to set our own rules. Mikhailo Maniliuk, Yevhen Kaminsky, details for the Intermarathon Jeden TV channel news.